My name is Chloe Vance, and I am 28 years old. 12 years ago, my family did the cruelest thing imaginable. They packed up and moved 2 entire states away without telling me. The only thing they left behind was a single note on the kitchen counter that simply read, "You'll figure it out." Let's go back to the exact summer I turned 16, the tragic day I came home from a long shift to a completely empty house. The furniture was gone, the photos were ripped from the walls, and on the bare kitchen island sat that single piece of paper. I didn't know what I'd done wrong. I spent days trying to figure out why they were so tired of pretending to love me. But the absolute truth was, they had never even pretended. When I was 12, I made a birthday cake for my mom completely by myself, only for her to call it clumpy. At 14, I tutored my younger brother, Michael, through his final exams, while he called me a know-it-all and slammed his door in my face. At 15, I gave my entire paycheck to my dad so he could cover the utility bills, only to get yelled at and called useless when I asked about it later. I was always useful, but never ever loved. My parents and my brother, my only family, had packed up and disappeared. I found out the hard truth from our landlord a week later. I had exactly 7 days to move out because they'd canceled the lease early. I slept at a friend's house for 3 nights before I completely ran out of places to go. Eventually, I was sleeping in the back of a small storage unit I rented with the last of my savings. I snuck in and showered at the local YMCA, ate peanut butter with a spoon for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and applied for jobs on the free library computers, pretending to the world that everything was completely okay. I clawed my way through every single day. I bought a prepaid phone, saved every single dollar, and watched free financial tutorials online. The turning point finally came when a regular at the small diner where I was working shifts offered me a temp job cleaning out complex corporate files. It paid triple what I made serving, so I immediately said yes. That temp job led to another opportunity, and another. I learned quickly, showed up early, and asked every single question. By 21, I was freelancing full-time. By 24, I had launched a consulting business. By 27, I was officially a self-made millionaire, a real one with a solid retirement account, a paid-off apartment, and 0 debt. The very first time my bank application hit 7 figures, I sat down on the floor and cried. Throughout those entire 12 grueling years, my family never reached out, not even once. They left me with nothing but that cruel note, and I absolutely did figure it out. But now that I have, they've decided they want a seat at the table they tried to break. Last week, a podcast interview I did about surviving family abandonment and building a business from nothing completely blew up online. It hit 1 million views in just 4 days. My inbox filled with thousands of messages from strangers, but then one specific email stood out. The subject line read, "You're still our daughter." It was from my mother. There was no apology, no explanation. Just a cold, clinical paragraph about hearing my side of the story on the podcast and how maybe we could talk. A few hours later, a second message arrived, this time from my brother, Michael. It was shorter. "We miss you. Can we fix this?" I stared at the screen for a long time before closing my laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs. My therapist, Melissa, suggested I take at least a week to process everything before making any decisions. So I tried to focus on work, went to the gym, and had dinner with friends. But those emails haunted me. After 10 days of heavy silence, I finally replied to my brother. I wrote something simple. "It's been 12 years. What changed?" His response came within an hour. He claimed the podcast made him realize the gravity of what our parents had done. He argued that he was only 14 when they left me and didn't have a choice. He said he'd looked me up online a few times over the years, but never had the courage to reach out, adding that seeing my success made him proud. I didn't buy it, not completely. If he was so concerned, why wait until I was publicly successful and wealthy? I asked him exactly that. His next email was much longer, and the ugly truth finally spilled out. He admitted that money was incredibly tight for them. Our parents' business had completely failed. His wife was pregnant with their second child, and their medical bills were piling up to the ceiling. There it was, the real reason for the sudden family reunion. A week later, my mom sent a follow-up email with old family photos attached, pictures of me as a baby, beach trips, and building snowmen. Happy moments that felt like they belonged to someone else's life entirely. At the bottom, she wrote, "We made mistakes. We want to make amends." I showed the emails to Melissa during our next session. She reminded me that I was in full control and owed them absolutely nothing. Part of me wanted to tell them to go straight to hell. Another part wanted to look them in the eyes and demand to know why they left me. I decided to meet my brother first. Just him, no parents. We arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop in Chicago, halfway between where we both lived. I walked into that coffee shop at 2:00 p.m. and recognized him immediately. He looked older, heavier, with a receding hairline. We sat across from each other like complete strangers. After 20 minutes of painful small talk, his voice cracked. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I was just a kid. I didn't know they were planning to leave you behind until it was too late. I was too scared to stand up to them." I watched his face closely, then asked the question that had haunted me for 12 years. Why me? Why was I the one left behind? He looked down at his coffee. "They always saw you as the strong one, Chloe, the independent one who would be fine on her own. They convinced themselves you'd be better off without us." It was the most ridiculous, insulting justification I had ever heard. I told him about the freezing storage unit, eating peanut butter for weeks, and scrubbing floors at 16 just to survive. His face crumbled. "I didn't know," he whispered. "They told me you had a plan, that you wanted to stay behind with a friend's family." All lies. By the end of the meeting, I let him hug me, but my arms stayed completely flat at my sides. Back at my hotel, I realized that while Michael seemed sorry, he was still framing himself as a helpless victim. He had been 14, not 5. He was old enough to pick up a phone or send an email at some point during those 12 long years. That night, my phone rang from an unknown number. Michael had given my contact info to our mother. I answered, and her voice sounded older, raspier. She instantly started crying, talking about how proud she was of me, how she always knew I would succeed. I let her talk herself out, and then I asked her the exact same question. Why me? Her answer was entirely different from Michael's. "We were drowning in debt, Chloe. We couldn't afford 3 mouths to feed. We knew you were smart enough to make it on your own. We figured you'd go to social services and get placed with a wealthy family. We thought we were doing you a favor." The sheer coldness of her words choked me. I hung up and blocked her number instantly. The very next morning, I received an email from my dad, his first contact in 12 years. He didn't offer a single apology. Instead, he wrote a long, angry rant about how hard their lives had been, about their impending eviction, and how Michael's wife needed urgent thyroid surgery. At the very end, he finally dropped the mask. "We need you to help the family out financially." Not a single question about my life. Not a single drop of remorse. Just a hand held out for my money. By Monday morning, my decision was locked in. I emailed Michael, telling him I was willing to build a relationship with him and his immediate family, but with non-negotiable boundaries. No money, no loans, no financial support of any kind, and absolutely zero contact with our parents until they took full accountability for their actions. His response came back almost instantly, dripping with the exact guilt-tripping tactics they used to prime me with as a child. "I'm really disappointed, Chloe. Our parents really need help. Family should support each other. You're being selfish with your success." I didn't reply. Instead, I booked an emergency session with Melissa and a 2-week vacation to Bali. I needed immediate distance from the toxicity. 3 days later, Michael left a frantic voicemail, completely changing his tune, apologizing for his outburst and promising to respect my boundaries. I wanted to believe him, but my guard remained firmly up. When I returned from Bali, my inbox was a war zone. 6 increasingly desperate emails from my dad sat in my spam folder. I didn't even read past the subject lines. The escalation turned physical on Wednesday. My building's doorman called up to my apartment, sounding highly uncomfortable. He informed me that an older couple was downstairs demanding to see me, refusing to give their names. I told him flat out that I wasn't accepting visitors. 5 minutes later, my phone rang from an unknown number. It went straight to voicemail, and my dad's angry, booming voice filled the speaker. "Chloe, we drove 8 hours to see you. You're being childish. We deserve a chance to explain." On Thursday morning, the nightmare caught up to my front door. I woke up at 7:00 a.m. to violent, heavy pounding on my apartment door. My chest tightened as I crept toward the peephole. It was them. My parents were standing in my hallway, looking weathered but furious. "Chloe, please," my mom's voice muffled through the wood. "We just want to talk to you." "We know you're in there," my dad barked, rattling the handle. "We love you, we're sorry." I didn't open it. I sank to the hardwood floor, my back pressed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably until they finally gave up and left. I called building security immediately and gave them strict instructions never to let those two people pass the lobby again. By Friday, I realized I couldn't stay in my own home anymore. I packed a suitcase and booked a flight to Portland to stay with my old friend, Rachel, one of the few angels who had let me sleep on her couch when I was 16 and homeless. As I was zipping my bag, the doorman called again, his voice panicked. He said the older woman was back downstairs, having what looked like a severe medical episode. She was clutching her chest, screaming my name, and claiming to be my mother. "Call an ambulance if she needs help," I told him, my stomach turning to pure ice. "But I am not coming down." An hour later, I slipped through the lobby, ensuring the coast was clear, and boarded my Uber to the airport. Just as I reached my gate, Michael called me, openly sobbing into the phone. "Mom had a massive heart attack, Chloe. She's in emergency surgery right now. This is entirely your fault for stressing her out so much." I hung up on him, my hands trembling as I dialed Melissa from the airport terminal. "Chloe, listen to me very carefully," Melissa said firmly. "You are a successful woman, but you are not responsible for your mother's biological health. This is a textbook, high-level manipulation tactic to break your boundaries. Get on that plane." I spent the weekend in Portland, and Rachel was absolutely furious on my behalf, keeping me grounded. On Sunday night, a fresh email from my dad confirmed the truth. My mom was stable, had a stent put in, and would be discharged on Tuesday. The email concluded with, "She's asking for you. Don't you think you've punished us enough?" I threw the phone onto the couch. No apology, no accountability for tracking me down, just more weaponized guilt. But the real twist arrived on Tuesday morning, back in my apartment. The doorman called up saying a young woman with a small child was in the lobby, begging to see me. She claimed to be my sister-in-law, Jenny. Deciding to face this head-on, I told him to send her up. When I opened the door, a completely exhausted young woman holding a sleeping toddler looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm Jenny, Michael's wife," she whispered. "I came alone because I wanted to talk to you without the family drama." I let her in, and what she told me over a glass of water completely shattered the remaining lies my family had built. "Chloe, I only learned about your existence 3 years ago," Jenny admitted, her voice trembling. "Michael told me you were mentally unstable, that you stole all of your parents' life savings at 17 and ran away. I always thought the story felt empty, but I didn't push. Then, last week, your podcast episode blew up. I listened to it, confronted Michael, and he finally cracked and admitted the truth." I sat frozen as Jenny pulled out her phone and opened Facebook. She scrolled back through years of public posts from my mother and father. There were public prayers asking to find their troubled, runaway daughter, and claims that I had ruined their business by stealing their cash. They had spent years crafting a narrative where they were the tragic, grieving victims, all dated years after they had willingly abandoned me in a rental home with a note. "I am horrified by what they did to you, Chloe," Jenny said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "And I am disgusted that they tried to use my upcoming thyroid surgery as a sob story to extract money from you. Yes, we have bills, but we have insurance. Your parents are the ones facing absolute financial ruin because their lies are finally catching up to them. Your podcast has everyone in their church asking questions they can't answer." She looked down at her sleeping daughter. "This is Lily. She's 3. I have another baby on the way, and I refuse to let my children grow up around people who think abandoning a child is acceptable. The door is open to you, Chloe. No pressure, no financial expectations. just an open door to your niece. For the first time in 12 years, a member of the Vance family had looked at me and told the absolute, unedited truth. But the monsters back in Oak Creek weren't done fighting for their narrative. That night, after Jenny left, the situation took a dark and threatening turn. I received an email from my father. The tone wasn't desperate anymore. It was pure venom. He claimed that if I continued to spread lies about them on my podcast, they would sue me for defamation, alleging they had proof I had stolen their savings before disappearing. They demanded a public apology and significant financial compensation for the damage to their reputation. I immediately forwarded the message to my attorney, Marcus. He was entirely unbothered. "This is an empty threat, Chloe," he assured me. "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Save everything, but do not respond. I'll handle it if they actually file anything, which they won't." The next morning, Michael called me in a complete panic. I let it go to voicemail, and his shaky voice filled the room. "Chloe, Jenny told me she visited you. Our parents are absolutely furious. They are saying terrible things about her now, too, and I'm terrified they're going to do something desperate. Please call me back on Jenny's phone, not mine." Recognizing the danger, Marcus suggested we meet Michael and Jenny somewhere public with him present. We set up a meeting at a quiet restaurant near his downtown office the following afternoon. When they arrived, my heart broke. Both of them looked physically ill from stress, and Jenny had a dark, distinct bruise blooming across her forearm. As we sat down, the horrific story finally came to light. Our parents had been financially draining Michael for years, moving into his home, taking emergency cash, and controlling his life. When Jenny had finally confronted them about the Facebook lies and my podcast, my dad had lost his temper, grabbing her arm hard enough to leave marks. Michael had finally found his spine and kicked them out of the house. Now, they were staying in a cheap motel nearby, stalking his workplace, and calling every hour. Marcus took detailed notes, advising Michael to immediately change their home locks, passwords, and bank accounts, since our dad was still co-signed on his old college account. As we stood up to leave, Michael looked at me with tears in his eyes and hugged me. This time, I hugged him back. It wasn't full forgiveness yet, but it was a recognition that we had both been broken by the exact same monsters. The next morning, the terror hit a breaking point. Jenny called me, completely hysterical and sobbing. "They broke into the house, Chloe. They took Lily's baby photo albums, our marriage documents, and Michael's work laptop. They left a handwritten note on the table that says, 'Family matters should stay in the family.'" I told her to call the police immediately and rushed over to their house. By the time I arrived, a police car was outside, but the responding officer seemed dismissive, assuming it was just a family misunderstanding over a spare key. The system was failing them, just like it had failed me 12 years ago. Marcus arrived shortly after, looking grimly at the scattered papers and pulled-out drawers. "This changes things," he said. "Breaking and entering is a serious criminal offense. We need to document everything, and you all need to get out of this house tonight. I will help you file for emergency restraining orders first thing in the morning." As we were packing Jenny and Lily's bags, Michael's phone buzzed with a text from our dad. Just 3 words. "We're watching you." My hands shook as I took a screenshot and sent it to Marcus. I looked at my brother, his pregnant wife, and my 3-year-old niece. "You're coming to stay with me," I said firmly. "My building has 24/7 security, cameras, and a doorman who already knows exactly what those people look like." That night, the 4 of us ate takeout on the floor of my living room. It wasn't the beautiful, warm family reunion I had ever dreamed of during those cold nights in the storage unit. It was messy, terrifying, and stressful. But as I watched Lily play with her toys and listened to Michael and Jenny talking quietly in my kitchen, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't facing the darkness entirely alone. We were standing together, ready to face the final reckoning in a court of law. The next morning, Marcus called with the first real victory. The emergency restraining orders had been officially granted, and a court date was set for the following Monday to make them permanent. Even better, a detective Marcus knew had pulled security footage from a gas station near Haley's house. The video clearly showed my parents' vehicle parked there during the exact window of the break-in. But my parents weren't going down without a fight. On Friday night, the harassment escalated again. We heard a loud thud in the parking garage, and when building security checked, someone had thrown a brick through the window of Haley's car. The security footage showed a man wearing a baseball cap, carefully keeping his face turned away from the lenses. We couldn't legally prove it was my dad, but we all knew the truth. We filed yet another police report and added it to our growing mountain of evidence. Monday morning arrived, and the atmosphere inside the courtroom was thick with tension. When my parents walked in, they looked older and desperate, but the moment my dad caught my eye, his face hardened into that same familiar expression of cold authority. He still thought he could control us. When the judge opened the floor, their attorney tried to paint a picture of two grieving, heartbroken parents who had spent 12 years searching for their unstable, runaway daughter, and were now being cruelly kept away from their grandchildren. Then it was our turn. Marcus didn't just present the facts. He laid out an undeniable timeline of calculated malice. He presented the timestamps of the Facebook posts Jenny had uncovered, proof that my parents were publicly pretending to hunt for me years after they had intentionally broken the lease and left me at 16 with nothing but a note. He submitted the threatening emails my dad had sent demanding financial compensation, the medical records of the bruise on Jenny's arm, the gas station security footage from the break-in, and the police reports regarding the smashed car window. As the stack of evidence grew, my mother began to weep openly, and my dad's arrogant posture completely collapsed. The alternate reality they had spent over a decade crafting was dissolving right in front of the judge. The judge didn't mince words. She looked directly at my parents and described their behavior as a calculated pattern of emotional abuse, harassment, and extortion. The permanent restraining orders were granted immediately for myself, Haley, Jenny, and the children. They were legally barred from coming within 500 feet of our homes, workplaces, or schools for the next 5 years, with the judge warning my dad that any violation would result in immediate jail time. In addition, the detective confirmed outside the courtroom that the state was officially moving forward with criminal charges for the break-in based on the stolen documents found in their motel room. When we walked out of that courthouse, the heavy, suffocating weight that I had carried since the summer I was 16 finally lifted. That evening, back at my apartment, Haley and Jenny started packing their bags to return to their house, which now had a brand new, advanced security system installed. As Haley stood by the door, he looked at me, his eyes full of regret. "I wasted 12 years believing their version of you, Chloe," he said softly. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there to help you figure it out." I looked at my brother, fully seeing him for the first time in over a decade. "We were both trapped in their storm, Haley," I replied, stepping forward to hug him. "The important part is that we survived it." They left, and for the first time in weeks, my apartment was completely silent again. I walked into the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table. My family had abandoned me at 16, leaving me to survive in a cold storage unit on peanut butter and stolen library internet. They had tried to write me out of their lives when I was broke, and then tried to rewrite history when I became a millionaire. But karma is an impeccable accountant, honey. The ledger always balances in the end, the receipts never lie, and my future is officially a closed book to the people who chose to walk away.